We're going to combine graphs and factoring. The factor theorem says a polynomial function with a factor x minus a has a factor f minus a if and only if f of a equals 0. Thus, f minus a is a factor of f of x if and only if f of a is a solution to f of x equals 0. They ask us here to solve 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0 using both graphing and factoring methods. Let me show you how to calculator and graph 2x squared minus 5x minus 3. And graph that. This is on a standard window. It appears that we have an intersection here. Let's go to second, trace, which is calc. We want to find a 0. So we do 2. We're looking for this 0, so x equals 0 is on the left side of it. So we can enter there. On the right side, I'm going to guess something over here, say 5. Enter that. And then something in between the 0 and the 5, maybe 2. Well, it's actually 3. So x equals 3 is a 0, and x, that means x minus 3 is a factor. Going back, I found that x equals 3 was a 0, so x minus 3 is a factor. And we can use that to help factor our 2x squared minus 5x minus 3. We ask ourselves, let's look for, when we do FOIL, we do first term. So what do we take times x to get 2x squared? 2x. What do we take, they're doing the last terms, what do we take times negative 3 to get negative 3? That would be a positive 1. And let's check. The outside terms will give me a 1x, and the inside terms will give me a negative 6x. That would add to the 5x I need. So we know that x minus 3 equals 0, or x equals 3. We already knew we had that factor. And 2x plus 1 equals 0. 2x equals negative 1. X would equal negative 1/2. That is our other solution to this equation. Method is another method to solve quadratic equations. The solutions to the quadratic equation x squared equals c, or x equals plus or minus the square root of c. Note that when we take the square root of both sides, we use the plus or minus symbol because there's both a positive and a negative value that when squared would give you c. Using that method, we want to get it on the form x, just an x squared equals a number. So the first thing I'm going to do for this equation is add 6 to both sides. And I want just an x squared equals a number, so I divide by 3, and I find out that x squared equals 2. Solving that by the square root method, that means x equals plus or minus the square root of 2. And that is the solution. And this is the most exact solution. If you use your calculator and find out the square root of 2, it's rounded off and not exact. So the most exact solution is a plus or minus the square root of 2. Now this one looks a little different, but notice we have a quantity squared. So we could take the square root of both sides, and on the left side, the square root of x minus 2 squared is x minus 2. On the right side, square root of 7, we'll of course use plus or minus the square root of 7. Now we have x minus 2 equals, we really want x equals, so we make it x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 7. And this becomes my solution. And this is the exact solution when I use the square root symbol. Another method to solving quadratic is called completing the square. To solve ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, we're completing the square. First, if a does not equal 1, you divide both sides of the equation by a. So you want, basically you want a 1x squared, and then you'll have b over a and c over a. You rewrite the equation so the constant term is alone on one side of the inequality symbol. So now, you want this term and the c to the other side. You square half of the coefficient of x, add this square to both sides of the equation. You factor the resulting trinomial as a perfect square and combine like terms on the other side. This is why this is called completing the square, because we make a perfect square trinomial and complete that square. And then we use the square root property to complete the solution. It's a little confusing when we just read it. Let's try it. Here we have the equation x squared plus 4x minus 7 equals 0. Luckily, we have a 1x squared, so we're good. Next step is to move the constant term to the other side. So we would add 7 to both sides. That will make this a positive 7. What we'll do next, you notice I left it blank, because we're going to add something, the same thing, to both sides of this equation. That's the only way we keep it balanced. In getting ready to factor that, we take half of this coefficient of x. So half of 4 is 2, and that's a positive. So this is a positive 2. I square that 4, and I add that 4 to both sides. Now this is a perfect square trinomial. It's a perfect square trinomial, x squared, and the square root of 4 is 2. And if you square it, you'll find out you would get a 4x, doubling the 2 times x. So now we have 2x, x plus 2 squared equals 11. Taking the square root of both sides, I have x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 11. Moving the 2, I have x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 11. Completing the square always works for solving a quadratic equation. Completing the square will always work. Factoring doesn't always work because not all trinomials can be factored, but completing the square always works. Another method that always works is a quadratic formula. The solutions to the quadratic formula, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, are given by this formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You will need to know this equation. Have it memorized. Note that a is the coefficient of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is the constant term. This formula is derived by taking this equation ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 in this form and doing the completing the square steps. So this is really a shortcut to completing the square almost.